The night my mother called me a thief, it was raining so hard I could barely see the porch steps through my tears. I was 17, barefoot, shivering, and still trying to explain myself when she opened the front door, pointed into the storm, and screamed, "Get out of my house!" My sister stood behind her with one hand over her mouth, pretending to cry. Pretending. Because the diamond bracelet she claimed I stole? It was never stolen. She hid it. She framed me, and my mother chose her. I still remember the way the rain soaked through my hoodie as my duffel bag hit the driveway. I still remember my father standing in the hallway, doing nothing. I still remember my mother's final words before she slammed the door in my face. "Don't come back until you're ready to admit what you did." I didn't come back. 5 years later, my mother walked into my office, dropped to her knees, and begged me to save the same sister who destroyed my life. I looked down at the chart in my hands. Chloe Bennett, end-stage renal failure. Then I looked at my mother and smiled. Remember the jewelry? My name is Dr. Ava Bennett, and if you think that smile meant I was about to take revenge, you're only half right. Because what happened next, it was so much worse for them than revenge. It was truth. And truth, when it finally comes out after years of lies, doesn't just hurt, it ruins people. I know, because I watched it ruin my family one heartbeat at a time. And the craziest part? They did it to themselves. I should probably start with the bracelet, not because it was expensive, not because it was beautiful, but because that stupid little piece of jewelry was the weapon my sister used to erase me from my own home. And for a while, it worked. Growing up, there were 2 daughters in our house, but only one of us was treated like she mattered. That was Chloe. Chloe was 2 years older than me, blonde, polished, charming when she wanted to be, and mean in ways that were hard to prove. She never yelled when she could whisper, never hit when she could manipulate, never lied in sloppy ways. Her lies were elegant, clean, built to sound reasonable. I was the opposite. Quiet, studious, awkward in family photos. The girl who spent Friday nights buried in biology textbooks while Chloe got ready for parties like our house was her own little runway. And my mother, Linda Bennett, loved that about her. My mother liked things that sparkled, pretty daughters, perfect smiles, impressive appearances, things she could show off to neighbors and church friends and people she secretly competed with. Chloe was her trophy. I was her inconvenience. My dad, Mark Bennett, wasn't cruel exactly. He was just weak. The kind of man who mistook silence for peacekeeping. The kind of father who watched injustice happen from 10 feet away and told himself he was staying out of it. So if you're wondering whether my family dynamic was unhealthy before the bracelet incident, let me save you some time. Yes, it was rotten long before it collapsed. I just didn't know how rotten until the night it finally gave way. Back then, Chloe had just turned 19 and come home from her first year of college for the summer. My mother threw her a dinner party like Chloe had cured cancer instead of surviving freshman year at a private university mostly paid for by my parents' savings. I remember that dinner clearly because I was the one setting the table while Chloe sat at the island scrolling on her phone. My mother floated around the kitchen in a silk blouse, excited because she had a reason to show off the special gift she'd bought Chloe, a diamond tennis bracelet. Real diamonds, white gold, far beyond what our family could comfortably afford. But comfort didn't matter to my mother if appearances were involved. She presented it after dessert like she was crowning royalty. "Oh, Mom," Chloe gasped, pressing both hands to her chest. "It's gorgeous." My mother beamed. "You deserve gorgeous." Then she looked at me. "Maybe this will inspire you to be a little more polished?" That was her way. Every compliment for Chloe came with a cut aimed at me. I forced a smile and kept clearing plates. That night, I went upstairs, finished my chemistry homework, and tried not to think about how normal it felt to be invisible in my own house. The next morning, I woke up to screaming. Not argument screaming, accusation screaming. I ran downstairs and found my mother in Chloe's room, tearing through drawers, makeup bags, closet shelves. Chloe sat on the bed crying. "My bracelet is gone," she sobbed. My mother turned to me so fast it startled me. "Were you in here?" I blinked. "What?" "Answer me, Ava." "I mean, not since the party. Why?" Chloe looked up with mascara-streaked cheeks. "I left it in my jewelry box last night. And now it's gone," my mother snapped. "Funny how nobody else was in this house except family." I stared at them both. "Are you serious?" My father appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, as if this were just some morning inconvenience. "I didn't take anything," I said. My mother folded her arms. "Then why are you getting defensive?" "Because I was being accused of theft in my own kitchen before breakfast, that's why." But in families like mine, innocence never mattered as much as tone. Chloe wiped her eyes dramatically. "I don't want to believe Ava would do this." That sentence, that fake, trembling, poisonous sentence. I hated it because it sounded gentle, reasonable, hurt. But what it really meant was, I'm about to make everyone think she did it while pretending I'm too kind to say so. "I didn't take your bracelet," I said again, slower. Chloe looked away. "You were staring at it all night." I felt something cold slide through my chest. "Seriously?" "You were," she whispered, "and you've been acting weird for weeks." "Weird?" I actually laughed. "Because I study and stay out of your way?" My mother stepped closer. "Ava, if money is tight, or if you wanted something—" I just stared at her. That was the moment it hit me. She believed it. Not maybe, not partly, fully. She believed I stole from Chloe because somewhere deep down it fit the version of me she already had in her head, the lesser daughter, the resentful one, the one capable of ruining a beautiful thing because she could never be one. My father finally spoke. "Ava, if you took it, just give it back. We can handle this privately." That was worse than yelling, that soft, disappointed voice, that assumption disguised as mercy. I looked at them all and realized I was alone, completely alone. "I didn't take it," I said. "Search my room." My mother didn't hesitate. She stormed upstairs like she'd been waiting years for permission to invade my life. I followed her, shaking with anger, Chloe behind me, my father trailing us all like a ghost. My room was small and plain, books stacked on my desk, sneakers by the closet, posters on the wall. Neat enough because mess gave my mother one more reason to criticize me. She tore through everything. Drawers, backpack, laundry basket, closet, mattress. And then she found it, wrapped inside one of my winter socks in the back of my dresser drawer, the bracelet. For a second, the room went completely silent. You know that kind of silence? The one that isn't peace, the one that arrives right before your life changes. I stared at the bracelet in her hand and couldn't even process what I was seeing. "No," I whispered. My mother's face hardened with a kind of triumph that made me sick. "I knew it." Chloe let out this broken little gasp from behind us like she was the one betrayed.
I started, but the words fell apart in my mouth. "I didn't put that there." "Stop lying!" my mother screamed. My father rubbed his forehead. "Ava." "It was planted," I shouted. "I swear to God, I didn't do this." Chloe started crying harder. "Why would you do this to me?" I turned on her so fast she flinched, or pretended to. "Because you did this." My mother slapped me, hard. The room rang. I remember touching my cheek and looking at her like I didn't recognize her, maybe because in that second I didn't. "Don't you dare accuse your sister to cover your own ugliness," she hissed. Ugliness. That was the word she chose. Not mistake, not theft, not betrayal. Ugliness. As if something inside me had finally shown itself and disgusted her. My father took a step forward like maybe he would calm things down, but Chloe spoke first. "She's always hated me," she said through tears. "You know she has." And that was it. Case closed. Verdict delivered. No trial, no questions, no chance. My mother told me to pack a bag. At first, I thought she meant for the weekend, maybe to stay with an aunt, maybe to teach me a lesson. Then she said, "You are not sleeping under my roof after stealing from this family." I laughed because it was too insane to be real. Then I realized she meant every word. "You're kicking me out?" I asked. My voice sounded small, younger than 17. She crossed her arms. "Maybe one night in the real world will teach you some accountability." "It's raining." "Then you should have thought about that before you stole." My father finally whispered, "Linda, maybe we should—" She snapped, "Not now, Mark." And just like that, he disappeared back into himself. That's how I ended up on the porch with a duffel bag in a thunderstorm while my sister watched from behind my mother's shoulder. I wish I could tell you Chloe looked guilty. She didn't. She looked satisfied. Only for a second, only enough for me to see it. Then the door slammed, and my old life ended. I walked 3 miles in the rain to my best friend Megan Carter's house. Her mother opened the door, saw my face, saw the bag, and didn't ask a single question before pulling me inside. That kind of kindness can wreck you when you're used to surviving on scraps. I held it together for maybe 30 seconds. Then I fell apart in their entryway. Megan's family gave me dry clothes, hot soup, a blanket, and something my own family never gave me when it mattered most: belief. When I said I didn't steal it, Megan said, "I know." No hesitation, no squinting suspicion, just certainty. I cried harder at that than I had at the accusation. But kindness doesn't erase logistics. I couldn't stay forever. Child services got mentioned. Legal guardianship got mentioned. My mother, of course, refused to admit she'd thrown me out and told anyone who asked that I was staying elsewhere until she reflected on her behavior. That was Linda Bennett in a nutshell. Destroy your child, then polish the story. Luckily, Megan's Uncle Ray Carter knew a retired judge who helped push emergency arrangements through quietly. By the time my mother realized she'd lost control of the narrative, I was already enrolled in summer coursework and working part-time at a diner to save money. Did she call me? Only once. Not to apologize, to ask if I was ready to tell the truth. I hung up, and from that point on, I made a decision that changed everything. If my family wanted to bury me, I would become impossible to ignore. I studied like my life depended on it because in some ways it did. I took every AP class I could, worked every shift I was offered, slept 4 hours some nights, lived on coffee and spite and this deep, burning refusal to let Chloe's lie be the last word written about me. You want to know something ugly? Hatred can be fuel. Not healthy fuel, not clean fuel, but it burns hot, and for a while it got me exactly where I needed to go. I got into Johns Hopkins on scholarship, pre-med. The same week my acceptance letter arrived, I saw on social media that Chloe had transferred schools after struggling to adjust. My mother posted a smiling family photo without me in it and captioned it, "So proud of our girl for overcoming adversity." Adversity. That word almost made me laugh. Chloe created wreckage and somehow always managed to pose as the survivor standing in it. I didn't comment, didn't message, didn't look back. At least that's what I told myself. But trauma doesn't vanish just because you leave the zip code where it happened. In college, every time someone misplaced a wallet, my stomach clenched. Every time a roommate asked, "Hey, have you seen my earrings?" I felt panic rise in my throat before logic could catch up. I became careful in ways that bordered on obsessive. I documented everything, double-checked everything, over-explained everything. People called me intense.
They didn't know intensity is what a person looks like when trust gets set on fire and they have to rebuild their life from ash. Medical school was worse and better. Worse because it was brutal. Better because pain had finally met purpose. I loved medicine in a way that felt holy. The precision, the science, the privilege of being trusted in people's most vulnerable moments. The fact that if you were good enough, prepared enough, disciplined enough, truth mattered. Labs didn't care who cried prettiest. Imaging didn't care who cried prettiest. Kidneys didn't fail because someone was the favorite child. The body told the truth eventually. It always did. That idea comforted me more than it probably should have. During my 3rd year, I chose internal medicine, then nephrology. People asked why kidneys. I gave them the academic answer: complexity, long-term patient management, biochemical balance, transplant medicine. The real answer was simpler. Kidneys fascinated me because they spent their entire existence filtering poison and trying to keep the body alive anyway. That felt familiar. By 28, I was Dr. Ava Bennett, attending physician at a major hospital in Baltimore, respected by my colleagues, living in a clean, high-rise apartment with my name on the lease, and no one able to throw me out of it. I had a good salary, good friends, a coffee order the barista knew by heart, a life built with my own hands. Was I happy? Sometimes. Was I healed? Not even close. Because healing and success are not the same thing. Success made me look powerful. Healing would have meant I stopped checking the shadows for old ghosts. And then one Tuesday morning, those ghosts walked right into my hospital. It started with a chart. Room 814, new consult, female, 29, acute on chronic renal failure, progressing to end-stage disease, history complicated, possible transplant evaluation. Name, Chloe Bennett. I froze. For a full 3 seconds, I thought maybe it was coincidence. Bennett isn't exactly rare. Then I saw the emergency contact. Linda Bennett, mother. And just like that, the years disappeared. I was 17 again, wet, shaking, unwanted. Only this time I was wearing a white coat. Only this time they needed something from me. I wish I could say I handled it with pure professionalism. I didn't. My first emotion was shock. My second was rage. My third was something colder than both: vindication. Because life has a twisted sense of timing, and apparently mine had waited until I was holding the authority in the room. I stood outside 814 longer than necessary, staring at the chart. Chloe had lupus nephritis that had spiraled over the past few years. There were notes about poor compliance, missed follow-ups, delayed treatment. Nothing unusual, and yet very telling. When people live like consequences are optional, the body eventually disagrees. I took one breath, then another. Then I walked in. Chloe was thinner than I remembered, her face puffy in that familiar way kidney patients sometimes get, skin dull, eyes tired, tubing, machines, beeping monitors that reduce a person's drama down to numbers. My mother sat beside the bed, and when she looked up and saw me, all the color drained from her face. Ava? Just that one word, my name in her mouth after all those years. I didn't answer her. I looked at the patient. Miss Bennett, I said calmly, I'm Dr. Ava Bennett. I'll be leading your care team. Chloe stared at me like she'd seen a ghost wearing a stethoscope. For one horrible, wonderful second, none of us moved. Then my mother stood so fast her chair screeched the floor. Oh my God! I checked Chloe's chart, her vitals, her intake. Clinical, efficient, controlled. My hands never shook. Inside, though? Inside was a storm. My mother took a step toward me. Ava, honey! I looked at her then, not as a daughter, as a doctor interrupted during rounds. Please sit down. She did. That alone told me everything had changed. I examined Chloe, asked routine questions, and she answered in this brittle little voice like the room was made of glass. When I finished, I closed the tablet and said, "Your kidneys are functioning at a critically low level. We'll stabilize you, continue dialysis planning, and begin transplant evaluation if you meet the criteria." My mother's eyes filled instantly. "She needs a kidney." "Yes," I said. "You can help her." "I'm helping her." "No, I mean, you can really help her." There it was, not even 10 minutes in. I looked back down at the chart, mostly so they wouldn't see the expression threatening to cross my face. Then I smiled, small, controlled. "Remember the jewelry?" I asked. The room went dead. My mother looked like I'd slapped her with memory itself. Chloe turned her face away, and in that silence I finally got something I'd been denied for 5 years. Power. Not abuse of it, not cruelty, just power. The power of truth waiting in the doorway while their lies ran out of places to hide. I excused myself after that and walked straight to the stairwell, where I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles turned white.
I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to go back in there and ask Chloe what it felt like to need the sister she destroyed. Instead, I did what trauma teaches high-functioning people to do. I compartmentalized. Then I went back to work. That should have been the end of it professionally. In a perfect system, I would have transferred the case immediately. And I tried. I went to my department chief, Dr. Elena Ruiz, and disclosed the conflict. I told her the patient was my estranged sister, that there was family history, that objective care could become complicated. Dr. Ruiz listened carefully and nodded. "You did the right thing telling me," she said. Then she explained the staffing shortage, Chloe's unstable condition, and the fact that until reassignment was formalized, I remained responsible for immediate treatment coordination. So there I was, responsible, at least temporarily, for keeping my sister alive. You ever notice how life loves irony more than justice? The next few days were a masterclass in self-control. I kept my distance when possible, delegated properly, documented obsessively, treated Chloe exactly as I would any other patient, no less, no more. And that, weirdly enough, seemed to unsettle my mother more than open hostility would have. Because cruelty she could understand. Professional indifference? That terrified her. On day 2, she cornered me outside the unit lounge. "Ava, please." I didn't stop walking. She followed me. "I know you're angry." That made me laugh softly. "Angry?" I turned to her. "You threw your minor daughter into a storm over a lie." Her face crumbled. You thought Chloe was incapable of lying and I was easy to lose." She opened her mouth and closed it again. For once, words failed her. "Good." "Ava," she whispered, "this isn't the time." "No," I said, 5 years ago was the time." I walked away. That night I sat alone in my apartment with takeout growing cold on the counter and realized something ugly. Part of me didn't want closure. Closure felt too clean, too gentle. What I wanted was confession. Not because I needed it to know the truth. I knew. I'd always known. I wanted them to say it, out loud, in a room with no escape. Turns out, I was going to get exactly that, just not the way I expected. On day 4, Chloe requested to speak to me alone. Every instinct told me not to go, but professionally I couldn't refuse without cause, so I entered her room after evening rounds. She looked exhausted. Dialysis had started. Her hair was pulled back messily. Her usual vanity had been stripped away by illness, and for the first time in my life, Chloe looked less like a queen and more like a consequence. "You need to ask me something," she said. I stayed near the door. "Make it quick." Her eyes flicked up to mine. "Are you a match?" I almost laughed. No one has tested me. "But you could get tested." There it was again. Not apology, not remorse, request.
need wrapped in entitlement. Why would I do that? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears so suddenly I might have believed them once, years ago. Because you're my sister. I took a step closer then, not out of compassion, but because I wanted her to hear me clearly. No, I said softly. You're the person who threw me for theft, stood there while I got thrown out like trash, and never once came after me. Biology is not the same thing as sisterhood.
She started crying. Real crying this time, I think. Funny how mortality improves sincerity. I was 19, she whispered. I was stupid. You were cruel. I didn't think Mom would actually kick you out. I just stared. That was her defense? Not, I didn't do it. Not, I'm sorry. Just, I didn't think the bomb would be that big when I lit the fuse. You hid the bracelet, I said. She closed her eyes. And in that tiny movement, I had my answer. I felt my whole body go cold. Say it. She shook her head. Say it, Chloe. Her voice broke. Yes. The room tilted. Not because I doubted myself, but because hearing the truth after carrying it alone for years is its own kind of violence. Yes, I hid it, she whispered. I put it in your drawer. I swallowed hard. Why? She looked ashamed, for real this time. But shame is not redemption. You got into that summer program, she said. Mom kept talking about how smart you were. Dad was proud of you. Everyone was asking about your grades, your future, your scholarship chances. For 1 week, nobody was talking about me. I said nothing, because some confessions don't deserve help. She kept going, like once the rot cracked open, it all had to spill out. I just wanted Mom to look at me again, she said. I wanted her on my side. I almost smiled at the insanity of that. She was always on your side. I know, Chloe said, crying harder. I know. I was messed up. I was jealous. And then when she found it in your room, everything happened so fast, and I didn't know how to stop it. That was the thing about evil in ordinary families. It rarely starts with cartoon villainy. It starts with selfishness, cowardice, and the belief that someone else can absorb the damage. You watched me get kicked out, I said. She covered her face. You watched me stand in the rain, and you said nothing. I know. I wasn't. That scared me a little, because grief would have meant softness. What I felt instead was clarity, pure, blade-sharp clarity. I'm documenting this conversation, I lied. Her head snapped up. You are? No, I said, but maybe I should. Fear moved through her features faster than pain ever had, and right then I understood something important. Chloe wasn't just afraid of dying, she was afraid of being known. Good. Let her sit with that. Before I left, she said the one thing I didn't expect. Mom never found out. I stopped. What? Then why did you admit it to me? Because I need you, she whispered. There it was, the truest thing she'd ever said. Not remorse, need. And weirdly, that made my next decision easier. Because if Chloe wanted my help, then help was going to come with terms. Not illegal terms, not unethical ones, truthful ones. The next morning, I requested a family meeting with social work present, standard enough on paper, necessary, I said, for transplant discussions, support assessment, compliance planning, and family donor expectations. Dr. Ruiz approved it. When we gathered that afternoon, the room held me, Chloe, my mother, a transplant coordinator, a hospital social worker named Janice, Cole, and later my father, who arrived looking older, smaller, and more ashamed than I remembered. I began with medical facts.
Dialysis, transplant wait lists, living donor limitations, psych evals, compatibility, risks. I watched my mother cling to every word like she could bargain with science.
Then she said it. If Ava's a match, then we have to do this. We? I looked at Janice, then back at my mother. No, I said evenly. We do not. My mother blinked. What? No physician, patient, or family member is entitled to a living donation. Ever. But she's your sister. And I'm her doctor, which already complicates things. My father finally spoke. Ava, please, we know we've had our issues. Our issues? I repeated. He flinched. I turned to Chloe. Do you want to tell them, or should I? My mother looked between us. Tell us what? Chloe started trembling. For a second, I thought she'd stay silent again. That would have been very on brand. But then dialysis fatigue, fear, and 5 years of buried guilt finally did what my tears never could. They cracked her open. She didn't steal the bracelet, Chloe whispered. My mother frowned. What are you saying? Chloe cried as she spoke. I hid it. I put it in Ava's drawer. No one moved. Not my father, not Janice, not even the coordinator. It was like the air itself had paused to listen. My mother actually laughed. A sharp, disbelieving, ugly sound. No. Chloe nodded miserably. I did it. My mother looked at me, then at Chloe, then back at me as if reality itself were misbehaving. No, she repeated, softer now. I think part of her needed the lie more than Chloe ever did. Because if Chloe framed me, then Linda Bennett didn't just misjudge a situation. She exiled the wrong daughter. She shattered the innocent one. She chose vanity over truth and cruelty over patience, and then spent 5 years living as if that choice had been justified. People like my mother can survive many things, but not always a mirror. My father sat down hard in the nearest chair. Oh my God, he whispered. And I looked at him with more anger than I'd expected, not because he lied, but because he knew so little of his own family that a confession like this still shocked him. My mother turned on Chloe. Why would you say that? There it was again, not did you? Why would you say it? Because even then, even with truth bleeding out in front of her, her instinct was to question the confession instead of examine herself. Chloe cried harder. Because it's true. Linda shook her head frantically. No, you're sick. You're emotional. You don't mean this. I mean it. Her voice cracked so loudly the social worker stepped forward. I did it. I lied. Ava didn't steal anything. Then Chloe looked at me with swollen eyes and said, I ruined her life. That was the first honest sentence anyone in my family had spoken in years. My mother staggered backward like she'd been struck. And then, to my absolute disbelief, she turned to me and said, Why didn't you fight harder? The room went silent for a completely different reason. Janice looked horrified. My father covered his mouth. I just stared at my mother and felt the last living piece of daughterhood inside me die. Fight harder? I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. I was 17. You found evidence in my drawer, slapped me in the face, called me ugly, and threw me into a storm. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. That landed, because it was true. Truth hits hardest when it doesn't need dramatic wording. My father started crying then, quiet and pathetic and years too late. Ava, I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have stopped it. I nodded once. Yes, you should have. People think forgiveness begins when the guilty say sorry. Sometimes it begins when the wounded stop minimizing what happened.
That was my real turning point. Not the confession, not the begging. That sentence. Yes, you should have. No cushioning, no rescuing them from the weight of it. Just truth. The meeting ended shortly after. Social work took over. Transplant ethics got stricter. My case transfer was expedited. Chloe would no longer be under my direct care after stabilization. As I gathered my notes, my mother reached for my hand. I stepped back. That tiny movement broke her more than yelling would have. "Ava," she whispered, "please, let me fix this." I looked at her for a long time. Then I said the only honest thing I had left. "You can't." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty saying it. News travels fast in families, especially the kind that survive on selective truth. Within a week, I started getting messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. My Aunt Denise. There must be some misunderstanding. Cousin Rachel. I always wondered if something felt off. Grandma's old church friend, somehow. Your mother is devastated. Funny, isn't it? When I was the disgraced girl, silence. When the lie was exposed, suddenly everybody found a voice. I ignored most of it, except one message from my Aunt Denise. Your mother told people you stole because she truly believed it. Chloe has now admitted she lied. Your mom is falling apart. Please don't be cruel. I read that message 3 times. Then I put my phone down and laughed so hard I cried. Cruel. That word again. Women like me always get warned not to become what was done to us, while women like my mother move through the world detonating lives and still expecting to be handled gently. No, I was done with gentle, not in action, but in truth. So I responded with a single sentence. Holding people accountable for what they did to me is not cruelty. She never replied. Chloe's condition stabilized enough for outpatient dialysis. She was placed on the transplant list but had a long wait ahead. My hospital duties moved on. Technically, the story should have ended there, except life isn't that neat. 3 weeks later, my father asked to meet. I almost said no. Then I said yes, partly out of curiosity, partly because some part of me still wanted to look him in the eye and see whether regret had finally grown a spine. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between my apartment and the hospital. He looked wrecked, older than his age, shoulders caved, wedding ring still on, though I noticed he kept twisting it like it no longer fit. He didn't waste time. I left your mother. That actually surprised me. I kept my face neutral. Why? He gave a sad laugh. Because I should have years ago. Turns out, Chloe's confession didn't just expose one lie, it exposed the architecture underneath the whole family. My father started looking back at old arguments, old punishments, old moments when Linda always needed a villain, and somehow that villain was usually me. Once he let himself see one pattern, he saw dozens. Too late, of course, but late understanding is still understanding. I failed you, he said. Yes. He winced but nodded. I know. That was the first thing he'd ever done right in a conversation with me, not defend himself. He told me he was staying in an apartment, that Chloe was furious with their mother one day and dependent on her the next, that Linda had stopped sleeping, stopped eating much, spent hours crying and trying to call him, me, anyone. She keeps saying she wants her family back, he said. I took a sip of coffee. She should have thought about that before she threw part of it away. He looked down. I'm not asking you to forgive us. Good, because I wouldn't have. I just needed to say I'm sorry face to face. I studied him for a moment. Do you know what hurt most? I asked. He looked up slowly. It wasn't Mom choosing Chloe. I expected that, even if I didn't admit it. It was you standing there and letting it happen. I kept waiting for you to come after me, to call, to show up, to say, I don't know what happened, but you're still my daughter. Tears filled his eyes. You never did. No, he whispered. And maybe this makes me cold, that I didn't comfort him. He'd had 5 years to be comforted by his own excuses. I was fresh out. Still, before we left, I told him this: "You can regret it for the rest of your life. That still won't be the same as repairing it. Don't confuse the two." He nodded like I'd handed him a sentence. Maybe I had. A month later, I got the call that changed the ending. Not Chloe, my mother. She left a voicemail, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Please, Ava, please. Chloe got worse. There's an issue with the access site. They're saying complications. Please call me." My chest tightened despite myself, because no matter how broken the history, medicine is medicine, and emergencies don't wait for emotional readiness. I called the hospital handling Chloe's case and confirmed she'd been admitted with severe complications related to dialysis and infection risk. Serious, but not hopeless. The physician on service knew me by reputation and, with appropriate caution, shared only what was proper. Chloe needed ongoing treatment, stability, and time. Not a miracle, just medicine. I didn't call my mother back that night. Instead, I sat in the dark and thought about the version of this story people probably wanted. The revenge version, the one where I laugh in their faces, refuse all help, walk away, let them drown in what they created.
And I get it. Believe me, I get the appeal. But real power isn't always refusing to save someone. Sometimes it's refusing to become them. I had spent years proving I was nothing like my family. This was where that proof mattered most. So, the next day, I returned my mother's call. She answered on the first ring, breathless. "Ava?" "Listen carefully," I said. "I am not Chloe's doctor anymore. I will not interfere in her care, and no one is getting my kidney. Do you understand me?" Silence. Then, small and broken, "Yes." "But I will help you understand her treatment plan if her current team approves family education. I'll explain what doctors say. I'll translate if you're confused. That is all." She started crying again. "Thank you." I almost corrected her. Not for gratitude, for misunderstanding. This wasn't mercy for her. It was integrity for me. Over the next few weeks, that became my boundary. I would explain, clarify, translate medical language into plain English when the family got overwhelmed. I would not become emotionally available on command. I would not erase what happened. I would not hand over my body because guilt suddenly found religion. And you know what happened? For the first time ever, my family had to deal with me as I actually was, not the role they assigned me, not the villain, not the backup daughter, not the scapegoat, just Ava, a woman with boundaries. Turns out that was harder for them than hatred. Chloe slowly improved, not dramatically, not neatly, but enough. Enough to survive, enough to wait, enough to keep going. One afternoon, months later, she asked if I would see her, not as her physician, as her sister. I nearly refused. Then, curiosity got me again. We met in a hospital garden courtyard, both of us awkward in the kind of way only shared history can create. She looked better, still fragile, still tired, but alive. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said immediately. "Good." She nodded. "I wanted to say this right." I folded my arms and waited. She took a shaky breath. "When I framed you, I told myself it was small, just drama, just one fight. Then, when you got kicked out, I told myself Dad would bring you back. Then, when days passed, I told myself you'd be okay because you were smart and strong and everybody liked you anyway." Tears filled her eyes. Every version of my excuse was just me protecting myself from what I'd done. I said nothing. She looked at me. "I hated you for being good at things I had to fake." That one landed deeper than I wanted it to, because there it was, the real sibling wound. Not just jealousy, recognition. She knew I was real in ways she never felt she was.
I'm not asking you to save me. I know I don't deserve that from you. I just needed you to hear me say I was wrong, completely. And if the rest of my life is living with what I did, then that's fair." I believed her, not because she cried, because she didn't ask for anything after. No favor, no absolution, no emotional tip jar waiting for me to drop in sympathy. Just truth. And that changed something. Not everything, don't romanticize it. I did not hug her, we did not become best friends, a soundtrack did not swell while years of betrayal melted into a healing montage. That's not how deep damage works. But for the first time, I could imagine a future where her face didn't instantly drag me back into the rain. That was enough. More than enough, actually. As for my mother, that took longer. Much longer, because Chloe committed the lie, but my mother made it law. Months after the confession, she wrote me a letter. Not a text, a real letter. Maybe because some truths are too heavy for instant messaging.
In it, she admitted things I never thought I'd hear, that she cared too much about image, that she projected her own insecurities onto me, that she favored Chloe because Chloe reflected the kind of femininity and social status she understood, that my intelligence intimidated her because she never knew how to connect with me unless she was criticizing me. And this line, I still have it. The worst thing I ever did was punish you for not being easy for me to understand. I read that sentence maybe 20 times because it was the closest she ever came to naming the whole wound. Did I forgive her right then? No, but I answered. And sometimes after years of silence, an answer is the first form of mercy. People ask me now when they hear pieces of this story whether I donated my kidney. No, I didn't. And before anybody rushes to judge me, let me make something painfully clear. No one is owed access to your body because they regret how they treated you. Not family, not parents, not siblings, not anybody. Saving someone and surrendering yourself are not the same thing. Chloe eventually received a donor kidney, not from me, from a deceased donor after a difficult wait and a lot of prayers from people who suddenly believed in consequences and miracles at the same time. Her transplant was successful. She's alive. She takes her meds. She goes to therapy. Yes, therapy. All of us probably should have started there years earlier. My father and I speak sometimes, carefully, slowly, like people rebuilding a bridge over a canyon that still very much exists. My mother and I have lunch maybe 4 times a year, public places, neutral ground, no rewriting history allowed. If she drifts into self-pity, I leave. If she tells the truth, I stay. That's the deal. And Chloe, we're not close. Maybe we never will be. But last year, on the anniversary of the night I got kicked out, she sent me a photo. I almost deleted it without opening it. I'm glad I didn't. It was the old diamond bracelet, bent, reset, melted down and remade into a simple pendant. Attached was one message. I sold the stones and used the money to start a scholarship fund for girls abandoned by their families. I named the first one after you. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I wanted one beautiful thing to come from what I destroyed. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I cried. Not because everything was healed, but because for the first time something honest and useful had finally grown from the wreckage. That's the thing nobody tells you about surviving betrayal. Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like living long enough, well enough, and truthfully enough that the people who broke you are forced to see who you became without them. And the girl my family threw out in the rain, she's gone. In her place is a woman who signs charts, sets boundaries, saves lives, and never again begs to be believed. So when people ask how I felt the day my mother dropped to her knees in my office and begged me to save my sister,
I tell them the truth. I didn't feel triumph. Not exactly. I felt something quieter, something steadier. I felt the universe finally stop wobbling because the lie that once made me disposable had brought them back to the one person they had tried to discard, me. Not broken, not bitter enough to become cruel, not weak enough to forget, just standing there in a white coat, holding the truth they could no longer outrun. And if there's a lesson in my story, maybe it's this. When people build a family on favoritism, vanity, and lies, they think the scapegoat is the one they can afford to lose. They're wrong, because the child they push out is often the only one strong enough to survive the truth. I did, and I did it without their love. Imagine what I became once I stopped needing it. To end the story with even more power, you can say these last few lines for later. They called me a thief and threw me in the rain. 5 years later, they begged for my kidney. I didn't give them my body. I gave them something far more painful, the truth.